Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with part 2 of the bag making tutorial. So if you're sewing along with me, hopefully you're seeing some progress and you've got things more or less to this point. I think I sort of said to you before, sort of get your handles done, get the outside, and then this time we're going to look at doing the lining, pocket, and then assembling. So just to recap, to make the handles we used 7 2.5 by 4.5 inch pieces, and I just sewed them together, all the short sides, put that onto a 2.5 inch strip. We sewed either side, put some wadding up through the centre, and then we top stitched, and we did that twice, so we've got 2 handles. And then the outside we had 9 2.5 by 10 inch strips, and we just sewed them together in the order we liked, and then we top and tailed them with 3.5 inch pieces. Now if you've used an accurate 1/4 inch, that should come out at 18.5, and then we add a 3.5 inch piece to the top and bottom, so you should have 16.5 inches that way. And you can just see here I've cut out my corners so that we can shape the bottom of the bag, and I used 2.25 inch squares, so I just marked 2.25 inch square there and then cut those out with a little pair of scissors. So the outside of your bag should measure 18.5 by 16.5, and you should have cut out corners 2.25. Sorry, before I move on to the lining, I will just say all I've done with the quilting is I've just quilted sort of either side there, and I think I showed you on the other bag that that's what I'd done, and then just some straight line stitching in the top and the bottom. So that's the outside all done as well, so we can set that to one side. And then I've just cut 2 lining pieces, which are the same size as your bag. Now, sometimes your bag might not come out exactly 16.5 by 18.5. So what I tend to do is sort of measure that and use that then as the template to cut the linings. So if yours has come out slightly smaller, just make sure your linings are the same size as the outside. And then once again, we've just cut those 2.25 inch squares out from the corners. So that's our lining prepared. Now for the pocket, I added a poppered pocket on the first bag. So I've got a piece of fabric here, and it's 8.5 inches wide by 14, but you can adjust this size. You can sort of make it whatever size you like. And I've just folded that right sides together, and I'm going to stitch around 3 sides, but leave a gap for turning somewhere on here. Now I'm just going to flip this over, because what you'll see I've done here is I've actually ironed a square of Fusible Fleece, just quite close to the top, fairly central on that pocket, because what I'm going to do is add some poppers. So it's good to have a little bit of reinforcement there so that the popper isn't just pulling through fabric, because that will weaken it, and eventually that popper will probably rip the fabric, and your popper, you'll have a torn bag basically, which is not the look we're going for. So that just gives it a bit more strength there for where the popper's going to go. So I've done that just ahead of time. So we're going to take this to the machine and do a 1/4 inch stitch all the way around, leaving gap for turning. What we will do, I've got another square of fleece, which once we decide the position of our pocket onto our lining, I'll attach that to the back of the lining, so we'll have a piece on there as well, and then we'll put our popper in, and then we can do the assembly. So let's do the pocket first. Now you can pivot at the corner, or you can sew off like I've done there. It's entirely up to you. Oh, don't get too carried away. We need to leave a little gap for turning. And I tend to leave about sort of three fingers width, so I'll start against about there. Just take away a bit of the bulk of that fabric there from the corners, and I just sort of cut at an angle away from that, and that just will help our corners lay a little bit nicer. And just being careful not to cut through those stitches. It's why I've started to do sort of back stitch, and I'm just taking off a bit more there, just sort of chamfering those down because it just helps strengthen that bit where we're trimming back. It's a small thing, but it helps. Marginal gains, I think they call that. There we are. Put that in the rubbish. Right, now we can turn through. So really just nice simple patch pocket. As I said, you can make these any size. You could put a zipped pocket if it was going to be a bag that you wanted to sort of carry your phone or your purse or keys or something, more of your valuables in. You could definitely do a sort of a letterbox zipped pocket. We'll have to do that one day, won't we? Do a letterbox zipped pocket on a bag. Zips. I'm trying to get there. Right, I'm going to very carefully try and poke that out. I should have brought my pokey tool, my poking out tool. There's probably one in the box, but I'm not going to spend time digging for it right now. I'm just using a pen. Just be very careful. Don't be tempted to go in with your scissors, particularly if they're very pointy. You don't want to be poking holes in our fabric at this point. So there we are. There's the pocket. Now, it doesn't matter where that piece with the felt is. I tend to like it on the inside of the pocket rather than the outside. It just sort of looks a bit neater. But the snap is going to go all the way through both layers of fabric, so it doesn't really matter where it's going to go. And then I'm just going to take that to the iron and give that a press, and that's our gap. And when we top stitch this pocket in place, that will close that gap. There we are. And then the final thing I'm going to do is just take that, just checking that's where my opening is. That's going to be the top of my pocket. I'm just going to run a little top stitch along that edge. Now I'm going to keep it cream. I've got cream in the thread. I'm not going to sort of swap out. I don't mind having a bit of contrast. I think on this one I ended up using cream. So I've put on a different foot and I've just nudged my needle slightly to the left, and I'm just going to run this fabric on the inside of that foot, and that will help me keep straight. So there's that top stitch done, and it's all nice and straight because I've had that nice guide to follow. So we've got that, and I'm now going to position it on my lining. Now, any of you that's been watching my tutorials, you'll know that I say this all the time. I'm a little bit of a by-eye girl. So I'm just going to sort of put it somewhere where I think it looks sort of fairly centrally. I will find the centre in a minute, but what I'm sort of looking is positioning top and bottom. I think it can go up a little bit. You don't want it too near the top of your bag, so it's right at the top, but you don't want it right on the bottom either. You just want to sort of give yourself a little bit. So I think about there. So if I measure that, then I can, for people who like precise instructions, I'm going to go 2 3/4 inches up. So I'm going to leave my ruler there to give me my 2 3/4, and I'm measuring that from the top of the cutouts on the pockets. And then what we can do is just sort of fold that in half to find the centre. And then perhaps I should have done this bit first. Find the centre there. And then we can sort of line that up. But you know, it's the inside of a bag, so let's just line that back up on 2 3/4, 2 3/4, 2 3/4. Yep, and then we can put that there. So I'm going to pin that into place. I can move that ruler now. I'm going to pin that into place. Like I say, if you're not completely central, who's going to be looking in the inside of your bag to see how central your pocket is? If anybody does, they're probably not your friend. There we are. So now we're going to sew top stitch around these 3 sides, making sure we don't top stitch. That's also good to have the top stitch there to remind us we don't need to stitch that again because we wouldn't have a pocket. So I'm going to start here, go all the way around, and the gap's here, so this will close the gap as well. So I've left that foot on so I can use the same spacing on that one. So let's go and do that. And then once we've done that, we'll put the second piece of fusible fleece in and we'll put the poppers on. Now when you come to do this, just reinforce a little bit at the top because that's the stress point. That's where the bag will have the most stress. And I'm actually going to start a little way in and reverse back to it. And when I get to the corner, I'm just going to pivot. And I tend to cut the thread there so you haven't got sort of loose bits hanging out off the top there. And that's also why I started a bit further down to begin with. You haven't got your loose threads there hanging on the outside. So that's our pocket all down, all nice and secure. And that's closed that gap as well. So let's have a look at putting the poppers on. So that's all looking nice and neat. So I'm happy with that. I'm just making sure I've caught that edge, and I have. Okay, so our square of fleece in the pocket is there. So that's roughly, you can sort of feel it through the lining. So I'm going to sort of put that one there. And we're going to iron that down. Now you can either iron from this side. Now generally when I put fusible fleece in, I'll iron from the fabric side because the heat travels through and melts that glue a bit quicker, but it's easier to get to this side. So we'll just have to be a little bit patient. That looks like it's stuck. I'm just going to go in from that side as well. Now do check your instructions for anything fusible you use. If you haven't got any fusible fleece, you can use a sort of a medium or a heavyweight interfacing. But just check your instructions. Some of them need steam to activate the glue. This isn't. This is a dry heat one. So there we've got our 2 bits of reinforcement, basically. That's all we've done there. It's just added a bit of reinforcement. Now I'm going to bring in my little poppers. I've chosen this sort of taupe colour, I would probably call that. I think it sort of goes with that fabric and it contrasts a little bit with the pocket. And I'm going to put these under the close-up so you can see. And you have sort of 2 that look a bit like a drawing pin or a tack. And then you have one that has like a sticky out bit and one with an in a bit, and that's what makes our sort of closure. Now, what am I looking for here? My little tools. Now, if you want to have a look to how to make this case, because we've used these poppers before, there is a video we've done, and we'll put a link to that one. It's a rotary cutter case, but I use it to keep my pliers in that sets these poppers. Now, somebody asked me, I think in the comments, there was a question that said, what brand are these? These are all Prim. So these are pliers from Prim and the snaps are from Prim. But I know there are some other makes where you can get sort of snap setting tools and the snaps themselves. And they come in all sorts of different sort of colours. You can get sort of shaped ones and bits and pieces as well. But I use these all the time and they're really strong. I mean, I've had some things with those poppers in that have had them a long time and they get used a lot, and those poppers are still working. They're really robust, so I really like them. So I'm just going to decide sort of where, and that's why I did sort of a nice big bit of fusible wadding. So that's come out at 7 3/4, which is 3 5/8. I think is the centre then. 1, 2, 3, should be about there. And I'm just going to sort of eyeball where I want that popper. So I've gone in, so it's sort of halfway along the pocket. And then I'm just going to tell you how far down I've made that that is 3/4 of an inch down from the top. So I've got my little pokey tool. It's an awl, AWL, an awl is the official name for it. Now, I've had this a long time. I used to use it for paper crafting and look, the handles come off it and everything. But anyway, it still pokes holes. Just be careful. Now, you can, if you feel that you might go too far, put like a little bit of rubber or something, a rubber, you know, like an eraser, pencil rubber behind and sort of poke into that. But I just tend to sort of put my fingers there either side, and we're just going to make a little hole. And we're going down through that 2 layers of fabric and that bit of foam. Now we're just doing it in the top piece for the minute. And this is where I'm going to be using that little bit. So those 2 pieces there. And this goes on the outside. And what we've done, let me just try and hold it under the close-up so you can see, it just sort of pokes through there. Hopefully you can see that there. And then we're going to get this little piece. Ooh. Very fiddly, and put it on top, and then so it goes like that, and then we're going to get this tool. Now this bit with this sort of plastic cup goes on that, and this has got like a little spongy bit. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do it so that you can sort of see what I'm doing, and then we're just going to squeeze those together, and it doesn't take a huge amount of strength. And then what that's done is flattened that sort of drawing pin end, and that's holding that in now securely. Now what I tend to do, you can mark the other side. Now if you wanted to put your glasses case or something in there, if you were going to hold something, or you know, your purse, whatever you're going to put in there to sort of give you some room, some gap, you can do that. But what I tend to do then, once that's in, is I just tend to press that down, and what that does is just sort of indent underneath. So I doubt if you'll be able to see it, but I can see it. There's just a small little indent where, if I just put a little mark there, so it's going to go there. And then I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm going to poke a hole through. And then we're going to find our other 2 bits. So this is the bits that look like that. Let's put that centrally. Now this time, that flat-headed bit needs to go on the back of the lining. So it's going to go here. Okay. And then this bit is going to go on the inside. So that is going to clip into that. And then we're going to hold that. So once again, that's gone on there. And we're going to give it a squeeze. Sorry, that's going to be hard for you to see because it's inside the pocket. And we're going to give it a little squeeze. And then we give it a go. And you hear a little snap. And I tend to just sort of do it and pull it apart a couple of times just to make sure that's in and working. And it is. So that's our little popper on our pocket. So we're now, let's just tidy up, clear the decks, and we're ready for final assembly. Okay, so we've got all the parts now ready. There's our linings with the pocket, we've got our outside made, and we've got our handles made. So we're going to put these right sides together and pin. Now in bag making, generally they do 1/2 inch seams, but I don't. I'm more of a quilter than a bag maker, though I have made a fair few bags in my time. So I tend to go with 1/4 inch seams. I don't think it really matters too much, but generally the rule of thumb is 1/2 inch seam on bags. So take your pick which you want to do. Now on this one, we need to leave a gap to turn it through. So I'm going to, oh, that's a bent pin. I think we did have a clear out of our pins, but there we are. See, I'm unbending pins here now. There we are, that's gone back a bit straighter. So what I'm going to do is sort of double pin, where I'm going to leave, and my rule of thumb for a bag is sort of hands width. Tends to be quite good. Oh, another bent one. I'm going to blame that Katrina. She's been here bending pins. She'll be blaming me. Is that Jeanette? She's been here bending my pins. I think these are lovely pins, but they are quite fine. So when we go through wadding and stuff, I think it sort of bends them quite easily. So probably both of us, maybe we'll both take the blame. Not that we need to blame anybody. But I'll tell her next time I see her, have you been in there bending pins? I shouldn't actually, because I think it might have been Katrina that cleared them all out. Right, so that's all pinned, so I'm going to put that to one side. Now we're going to attach the handles to our outside. That's the top. Now on the other bag, we came in 3. So it's good having those. So I sort of put them, actually I think I put them on the inside of there. Let's just have a look. No, I'm going to go outside. We want a little bit of a gap. And I'm just going to hang that end bit over just a little bit. I'm going to use a thicker pin here because I'm going through wadding. And just make sure your handle's not twisted. And then the same with the other side. So I'm just lining the edge of it up with that seam there. Let's use our stronger pins here. There we are, and we're ready now to put these together. Actually, before we do that, let's just stitch those in place, and that means then we can get rid of the pins. So I'm just going to top stitch just very close to the edge there. Sorry, it's not a top stitch, it's just a tacking stitch, about 1/8 of the inch in. And all that means is it'll hold the handles and it'll mean we can get rid of the pins. Now I've still got this foot on, so let's just go with what we've got here. Perfect. I'm just going to up my stitch length a little bit. I'm going to take it up to a 2.8 just because there's a bit of thickness there it's going through. And this really is just a holding stitch. And same on the other one, just making sure your handle's straight when you do this. And now we can put these together. Now, if you wanted to pin that handle down out the way, you can. We want our right sides together. And then we're going to pin. And on this, we're going to sew down both sides and along the bottom. Just making sure our handles are out the way. It's a really nice quick bag, and if you don't want to sort of do the patchwork on it, you can just cut, sort of 2 pieces of fabric that are 16.5 by 18.5. Now we don't need to leave any gaps here. Okay, now we're ready to take both of those to the sewing machine. I'm going to work on the outside first and then we'll do the lining. On both of these, I'm going to do the side seams and then the bottom, and then we'll stop and do the corners, and then I'll do the same for the lining. So let's go and do that. Okay, let's switch out this foot. Change my settings back to, I'm going to leave it on, I'm going to take it down to about 2.5. Be mindful of is try as best I can to line up where we've joined those fabrics and where our quilting lines are. And before I get to this one, I'm just going to do the same. I'm just going to check where these fabrics are and just make sure those seams are as close on top of each other as I can get them. Let's do the other side. once again here, I'm just going to check. I can do the bottom. Right, now we can box the corners, and to do that I sort of call it making a smile. So at the moment it's laying flat like that, and we want to lift these two pieces and make them go that way. And then we're going to take one of the seams, let's just get the bag out of the way, so that bottom seam facing one way and then this top seam to face another, and hopefully get those to nest quite nicely there, and that distributes the bulk. I'm just going to pull that pin back. And the same with the other side. So at the moment there it's laying flat, so we put our fingers in and just pull that in the opposite direction. Now there's quite a lot of bulk there. We've got quite a lot of seams and fleece and fabric. And there's the bag made. So I'm just going to check it. Let's go into the centre and just check it. Now we're going to do the same with the lining. Now the only thing I do with the lining is I just make the seam just a little bit deeper. And what that means is that you don't have such a baggy lining, because if you've made them the same size, the inside space is always going to be slightly smaller than the outside space, if that makes sense. So if you just go in with a slightly deeper seam, and then that helps to sort of take up that sort of difference. So let's just poke, and I'm just checking that I've caught everything, that everything's lined up where I want it. Because this is the point, if you need to just go back and make any adjustments, you can. Yep, I'm happy with that. Well, that's a little bit off, but I think I can live with it. And then I'm just going to check that I've caught all the sides, and I'm happy with, let me just put that in under the close-up, I'm happy with where those seams have come there, and the same on the bottom. Because that will be the points that so there we are, there's the other one, that your eye will sort of see. I'm not so worried about the bottom ones, because people don't tend to be looking at the base of your bag quite so much, but they've come out. So there's the bag. So we're going to do the same with the lining, sew down the sides, the bottom, and then do those sugar bag corners, and then we'll be ready for assembly. So let me go and do that, and then I'll join you back here to put it all together. So once again, I'm just going to check that everything's lined up, that I've caught everything everywhere and the fabric hasn't slipped. It's always worth doing a little check before you put it all together, because there's nothing worse than getting your bag all sewn and then realised you've got a little bit that you haven't caught properly. So we've remembered our gap in the bottom. So we're going to leave the inside wrong side out. We're going to have our outside right side out, and I'm going to put one inside the other. And then we're ready for the final stitch around the top. So I'm going to match these seams at the sides, and I always tend to start with the side seams first. Now if you've got binding clips, these are quite good, because you've got a little bit of thickness there with the bag. Now just put your handles, make sure they're inside but down, out of the way. So I start with my side seams. And then I ease everything else around it then. So then we want to go to the centre, and I just sort of give it a bit of a sort of a pull. It's not a, just give it a bit of tension, I suppose I should say, rather than pulling. We don't want to be sort of stretching everything or anything, but I just sort of get it so that everything's fitting. And then once I've done the centres, I can just pin. Now while I'm here, I'm just going to trim off these little bits that I just had where the straps were. I'm going to put a pin in the strap. And then that one. And just make sure as best you can that your strap is actually sort of straight. You don't want to sort of sew them in at this point on an angle. So just taking those bits off. That's not too much to... Ooh. There's something about getting older where you start to lose dexterity in your fingers. It's a bit weird. I think I sat at my sewing machine the other day and I think I dropped the same thing 3 times. Just, you know, one after the other. It's just like, why can't I keep hold of that? The joys of growing old. There we are. Anywhere else where I feel it just needs a bit of a pin. Oh, I can't grab a pin now. Come on, fingers. I need new fingers. Okay, so we can take that to the machine now, and we're going to do a stitch all the way around. I'm probably going to do a generous 1/4 inch, I'm going to call it, right around the top of the bag. So I'm actually going to leave it on the setting that I used to sew the lining in, which was a generous 1/4. Now, has this got a free arm? Yes, it has. Let's take that off. You see, this is a first. Now, I tend to start at a seam. It doesn't really matter, but I tend to like to start at a side seam. Now, I'm also going to increase the stitch length again. I'm going to take it up to a 2.4. It's like, why are you? No, let's do 2.5. Let's be consistent, because we did 2.5 earlier, didn't we? You just want a bit of a deeper stitch because you've got a bit of thickness to go through there. And we're just going to sort of run the bag through. And I'll take that one out. Just making sure that that's level. Make sure it's not sort of gone in at an angle. Now when I get to the, when I get to the bag handle, I'm actually going to reverse a couple of times because that's also going to be a stress point because it's going to need to take the weight of whatever you've got in your bag. Just going through quite a thickness there. That's all that noise was, nothing to worry about. Should we see how we did this time? We've got a bag, hopefully. Right, so we're going to put our hand in where we left our gap, and this is the point where we hope we've left a big enough gap. I'm always doing that, thinking, oh, I've left a really big gap, and then you come to turn things through, and it's like, no, Jeanette, no, you haven't. But you'll be surprised how much you can fit through a tiny hole. So just pull it through gently. We don't want to be ripping stitches or even worse, ripping fabric at this point. There's some handles coming through. Oh yeah, we've got it now. Another handle. Oh. Yeah, we're through. So once again, I'm just going to do a little check because we've still got our gap. So if anything needs fixing at this point, we can still go back in and do it. So I'm going to check my handles have gone in straight, and I'm happy with that. Just trimming off. I've caught everything everywhere along the top. Yep. I've got lots of pokey out bits this time. And that's gone in nice and straight, yep. Yep, happy with that. So let's take that to the iron, give it a press, and then we've just got one final top stitch and we're done. But we've got a gap we sew up. Now you can do it on the machine. I tend to like to hand sew them, but you could absolutely do it on the machine. It's going to be in the bottom of a bag, so nobody's going to know. But I just sort of do a little whip stitch or over edge stitch or a ladder stitch. Right, let's just put my hand in there and poke out those corners before we iron. They don't take long. You've just got, it's not a huge amount of sewing. But I just sort of check as I go, make sure I'm happy. There we are. And I am. Now I'll show you the top stitch because I need to just talk to you about how we top stitch and how we have the handles. Let's give that a press first. Right, we've given everything a nice press. Now I'll do the outside of the bag later, but I just wanted to get that top done because now we're going to run a top stitch just around the top. And what that does, it finishes off that edge, but it also helps hold the lining down in place into the bag. So actually, let's get the free arm out again. Oh, before I do, let me just go in here and grab this foot. Oh. Now I'm definitely going to start at a seam here because we want this as hidden as we can. So I'm going to take my stitch length, up to a 3 because we're doing a top stitch. That's sort of my standard for top stitching. And I'm just going to judge where I want my needle to go, and I think it's going to be about there. And once again, I'm going to use the inside of this foot as my guide. Now, I think that's a bit too close, so it's got an extra high lift, which is handy. I'm not going to start right on that seam because that's very bulky. Actually, I'm going to come forward a little bit But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring up the bobbin thread because we don't want that knotting because that's going to be on the inside of our bag. So let's just bring up the bobbin thread, and then we know where that is and what it's doing. And then we're going to drop that needle as close to where we came out there as possible. Now I'm just going to make sure that that lining is sitting nice and on the inside, and then we're just going to go. Now when it comes to our handles, we need to make sure that the handle is pointing up. We don't want the handle back there. So let's just make sure I'm happy with where that lining is sitting. Right, that lining's up a little bit far, so let's just fold it under. And once again, I'm going to make sure that handle is pointing up. So we're sort of understitching really on that. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but that's what we're doing on that handle. Now it's quite bulky here as well, so I'm just going to go gently over that point. Now if you find your machine skips any stitches, and that's where it makes the stitch length inconsistent, you might need to go up a size in your needle. Because that will generally be your needle's not quite strong enough to deal with the thickness in places. And we're back to where we started. So I'm just going to overlap a little bit and then just reverse. And now all I've got to do is cut off those threads. Actually, I should have stayed at the machine because I think I said I was going to hand stitch this closed. I think we'll machine stitch it closed, shall we? And then I can show you. That. Let's do that. So I'm going to go for where our gap is. Just make sure everything's nice and lined up. We'll just put a couple of pins in that just to make sure it holds. And then I won't have any homework if I get this done. It'll be a finish. We like those. Right, let's just... Now I'm just going to start a little way back from where the gap actually starts. Some people sort of come in at an angle. I tend to just go sort of straight across. Once again, I'm just going to sort of more or less top stitch. Now I'm going to take my stitch length back down to a 2. There we are. So all I'd have to do now is just clip those threads. I'll do that in a minute. I'll do the tidy up in a minute. Let's do the big reveal so you can see. So that's our bag all finished. Let's do up the popper. And there it is. I'm really pleased with that. That's come out really nicely, and those French general fabrics are beautiful. And then we've got the inside. Let me just fold that down. We've got the lovely lining with our nice little poppered pocket. So I hope you give the bag a go. It's a nice simple one. Like I say, just sort of take your time and go through each sort of step by step. But it's actually quite simple to make. There's a lady in one of my quilt groups. I taught her how to make this bag many years ago, and she sells things for charity, and she's made loads of them to sell for charity. And each time she comes to show and tell, she's holding up all of these bags. So I think I asked her once how many she'd made, and she said she'd lost count. So really nice, quick, simple bag. As I said, I hope you give it a go. If you do share any of your photos with us. We'd like to see your bags and how you decide. But like I say, you can mix and match how you make the outsides if you've got other fabrics. If you've got, orphan blocks, patchwork squares, you want to piece into it, you can absolutely do that. So thank you once again. If you've liked that, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things. It really helps support our channel. And as I said, do share your photos with us again through our social media platforms. So thank you for spending some time with me making the Strippy bag, and I hope you'll join us again here next time in the sewing studio.